years now. Been a pond owner for about 4. I built my own pond in the backyard from scratch. And it's been quite an enjoyment. We've had, our fair share of mishaps, and I think everybody can kind of, share with that. We've lost our fair share of fish, and we've had our struggles in water quality and whatnot. So I'm hoping to bring a little bit of that knowledge that I've learned over the years kind of to the table. I hear about it from time to time. Some of us have lost fish, or we battle with algae blooms, and I kind of want to talk a little bit more about why we're encountering those things and what we can do to kind of combat those situations. Right? So we're going to talk about the nitrogen cycle and finding a balance to our aquatic environment pond. We'll start by talking about the water garden as an ecosystem. Obviously, it's something that we brought in artificially, but we want it to be as natural and self-sustaining as possible. We do have some equipment involved, right? First and foremost, we've got our filtration. This is what's going to filter out the debris from our pond. This is what houses beneficial bacteria to break down some toxins that are happening in our pond and try and keep the water clean. Next, we got our rocks and gravel. Right? A lot of people don't want to have gravel in their pond because it's difficult to clean around. Well, if we've got the natural bacteria cycle happening, we really shouldn't have to clean that often. The gravel helps house some of those beneficial bacteria to break down that excess waste that we have in our ponds from fish or organic debris that blow in. Right? So they are beneficial. Even if you don't have gravel, have some type of rock substrate or rock structure down inside the pond's water column. Next, we've got our circulation system, right? This is the heart of our ecosystem. This is what provides our flow, our turnover. This is what helps oxygenate our air to help keep our fish healthy and the bacteria thriving, right? So in our skimmer, we will need to associate this to our mechanical filtration. There really should be very little biological activity that's happening there. Again, this is just what's getting all of our heavy debris out of the water column so that they can be kind of refined down, reduced down, so it's not such a load on our ecosystem that's happening. Biological filtration is not only happening in the rocks, but also the waterfall bog or some type of filter media where the bacteria can house, grow, and thrive, right? And then last but not least, we've got our fish and our plants, right? The fish kind of add some action and some color to our water, so it's kind of nice and enjoyable to watch. And then our plants, not only are they beautiful, but they serve a purpose as well. They help cleanse the water. They help take some of those excess nutrients out of the water column so that we don't get plagued with algae blooms, right? So there's a nice balance that's happening within that pond environment. So some nutrients that support a healthy ecosystem. Ammonia, right? Ammonia is very toxic to fish, but plants do benefit from it, right? So if we're going to have fish, we really don't want to have any levels of ammonia. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Nitrogen, again, another key nutrient for plants. Okay? They can be toxic to fish in very high levels or very high concentrations. So we want to make sure that that stays in a nice balance as well. And then phosphates, again, important for plant growth. They're usually contributing to toxic algae blooms, and then they can also deplete oxygen. Right? So when we have lots of algae blooms, we're depleting oxygen. All can be introduced through rain, wind, so just the wind blowing, natural runoff, even if we are raised from our beds into the water, leaves, twigs, grass clippings, and fish waste. So all of those things are being introduced into our ponds. The bacteria that we want start out with nitrosomonas. These are the ammonia-eating bacteria that convert that to nitrites. Nitrites are then broken down by the Nitrobacter, and then they convert those to nitrates, or a form of nitrogen, for the plants to ingest. Right? Some other bacteria that we have are aerobic bacteria. These require high levels of oxygen. These are kind of the powerhouse of eating up debris in our pond, right? So they digest it at a much faster rate, it keeps the water clean and clear. And they have a tendency to release some bound nutrients that cannot be consumed by plants. This is where some of those anaerobic bacteria come in play. They are found in low oxygen areas in the water column. A lot of places where we don't have a lot of flow or turnover, or down inside the muck. They are very slow to digest debris and can release a smelly toxic gas, which is unpleasant, right? But they can assist in breaking down some of those bound nutrients that are released, bound nutrients, and then release them as phosphates that can be ingested by plants, right? So all of these are very important to have. Obviously, we really want more of the aerobic bacteria, so we want to make sure that we're keeping that water column nice and oxygenated so that they are thriving and blooming, right? That takes care of mostly all of our waste that falls into the water, right? So here's a little illustration of the nitrogen cycle, right? So we feed our fish. The fish excrete waste that falls to the bottom. As it starts to break down by some of those bacteria, it releases ammonia or ammonium. These are then consumed by the nitrosomas and plants, right? So plants do somewhat of a good job. They're not great at doing it. The nitrosomonas bacteria are actually a better devourer of those ammonias and break them down into nitrites, right? Nitrates are a little less toxic, but can still be toxic to fish. So we need, again, those nitrobacters to break them down into nitrates, which are very less toxic to plants and less toxic to fish and a great nutrient to plants. And then if those levels ever get out of hand, especially if we get excess nitrates, because we don't have enough plant life, or maybe in the cooler months, we would then do water changes to kind of dilute those values out. Okay? So, beneficial bacteria can happen naturally, right? Especially when we're newly starting a pond. However, they take a long time to develop. It could take up to 4 to 6 weeks before they start developing naturally, all right? So we may not want to introduce fish for a while until we get that balance going, or that cycle happening naturally. There are things that we can kind of give our ecosystems a boost with. Aeration, right? So just increasing levels of dissolved oxygen will help give those bacteria a better environment to thrive and grow in. I'm not just talking about waterfalls and circulation. I'm talking about actual aeration, right? Having an air pump down in there, an air stone that's dissolving that oxygen into the water column. Oxygenating plants are great, right? They're consuming those nutrients. They're growing. They are eating up some of the carbon dioxide in the water column and releasing that as oxygen. So that's good for both our fish and our bacteria. But they can be slow to develop, and koi love to uproot them, right? Has anybody had to try and have oxygenating plants and we just can't because our koi love to tear them up, right? So again, we may have to introduce an artificial form of oxygenation, all right? And then last but not least, seed your pond or your garden with beneficial bacteria, right? Just to kind of give that ecosystem a boost, if you will. Testing your water is also very important, right? So how do we know what's going on in our water without testing the actual values? If we look at water, it's really difficult to tell where those nitrogen levels are, where those nutrient levels are, or where the oxygen is, right? So testing the water is very important, right? The pH should be around 7 to 9. Ammonia should absolutely be 0, especially if we want to have aquatic life of any form. Right? Our nitrites should also be 0, and our nitrates should be 0 to 20 parts per million. Right? Again, ideally 0. If we've got 0, we know that we've got enough consumers in there eating up that nutrients. So plants are very important. All right? Phosphates, it's okay to have a little bit of phosphate in there. Again, that's a valuable nutrient for plants. It really needs to be less than 0.05 parts per million, so very low value, low amount. Carbonate hardness, this should be between 6 and 8. This is the buffering capacitor and how well we can change the pH, right? If you're ever wanting to change your pH because it may be higher up on that scale, we have to do that very slowly, right? We don't want to have fast changes in pH because it can really interfere with the health of our fish, right? Diluted at a very slow level, usually at about a half a point per 24-hour cycle, right? Again, as long as your pH is kind of within reason, there really shouldn't be any reason to change it. Most koi thrive within those environments. If we get it too acidic, they're not going to like it. If it gets over that base level of 9, it's too hard water, and they don't like that either. And then general hardness, right? So again, a typical scale for a natural pond is between 8 and 12. This is just the amount of dissolved solids that are in our water. We're going to find in our area that we're pretty hard naturally, right? So all of these levels can be adjusted by just doing general water changes. However, we can kind of, if we can create a situation where all of these things are happening naturally, we can really save on water and the amount of water changes that we're doing in the pond. So when you're doing water changes, right, know your tap water. What am I putting into this pond? I've tested the water in Cedar Park, which is where I live. It has a pH of 8, which is really great, right? It's right in between 7 and 9. Ammonia is 0, nitrites are 0, nitrates are also 0. Carbonate hardness of 8 and a general hardness of 9. Right? So if I'm trying to get under these scales, my tap water is not going to allow me to do so. I'm going to find a limit, and that's as low as I can go. Rainwater, on the other hand, I know that we've got a pond owner that I don't think is here, but they use rainwater collection. It can be good, but let's look at that pH. It's really acidic, considering, right? It has a pH of 5 naturally. Obviously, ammonia, nitrates, and nitrates are really good, but look at the carbonate hardness, or the general hardness, very soft water. And it really doesn't allow for any fluctuations in pH. So if I want to increase that pH level, I don't have a buffer enough to allow me to do that in 100% rainwater. Right? So not a great water to use all of the time. I think it would be good to kind of dilute it out, right? If you have rainwater, dilute it out with some levels of tap water. Not only does it help kind of balance out the carbonate and the general hardness, but it also brings in some necessary nutrients, some necessary solids that we need for aquatic life to live with. It's good for our fish. It's good for other organisms that live within the water column.
Dustin,
yes.
What type of testing kit do you use?
Good question. Thank you. So I actually brought some examples. This is one that I bought from Hill Country Water Garden. It's an at-home test. It has all those scales that I mentioned. Right? And it was about $60, pretty reasonable. Outside of buying a test kit, you can always take a sample to Hill Country Water Gardens. Now, it's not always convenient for everybody to drive to Cedar Park. I understand that, right? And really, truly, especially when you're starting out, establishing a new pond, doing weekly tests when you're doing your maintenance is probably one of the most important things that you can do to make sure that everything is staying within balance. And if anything starts to get off of that balance, we can quickly adjust for it, right? Outside of starting a new pond, I would say kind of within that 6-month period, we can go to monthly testing. Things should be stabilized enough where there shouldn't be any dramatic changes in the water. We do like the Fluval kit. You can find this at any pet store. Hill Country Water Gardens does not have this kit. I feel like it's a little bit more accurate in measuring for nitrites and nitrates. However, the color scale in this can be somewhat difficult to dissimulate as to exactly where that scale is falling. So we've actually moved over to the API test kit, and it's much easier to read. The color scale is much more visible and easier to discern what's going on. API.
It's at the bottom of the sheet. So
Yeah, so Katie passed around sheets, and it's gonna have notes on everything we talk about. But great question, Mike. So that gets me into talking about some of my favorite products that I use to kind of promote that balance within my pond, right? Obviously, anytime I'm adding water or doing water changes, I want to use a prime, right? A pond prime, and that's going to dechlorinate. It's going to detoxify any ammonias and nitrites. So as I'm getting in that beneficial bacteria balance, it's kind of detoxifying those elements so that they're safe for fish. Right? So as you're testing, as you're doing weekly testing, you see those levels getting out of hand, you can always dose with pond prime to kind of knock that toxicity back down, right? It also promotes slime coat, which is a very important aspect to healthy fish, right? This is what protects them from illness and sicknesses. So having a good slime coat is important with fish health. And then it just enhances nitrite removal, so that they can be digested, they're broken down, they're unbound, and can be eaten up by the plants, okay? Another thing that I like to use is the microbe lift PL gel. This is what establishes your filtered media. This is what puts that beneficial bacteria in there immediately, okay? So anytime you're doing a spring clean out where you're washing your filter media, not your mechanical filtration, right? That gets washed out weekly with tap water. Don't worry about seeding that. That's just to remove particulate matter, right? The one that really matters is the one up in our waterfall box, okay? So we definitely want to seed that. And we really should only be washing that out once a year, once every 2 years, only when the water flow starts to slow down. So once we see that media is fully loaded with debris, that's the only time that we want to remove it. And when we do, we definitely want to make sure that we've got new bacteria reintroduced, right? So that PL gel is a great way of seeding that filter media. Another product that I like to use is more of a seasonal product, kind of coming into that summer season, is the MicroLift Spring and Summer Cleaner. It's just an enzyme packet that you toss into the water. And I haven't opened that. But it's a dissolvable enzyme packet that you just toss them into the water, and the bacteria gets distributed throughout the pond. Kind of gives you a jump start for that seasonal readiness, right? We definitely need to wait for the water temperatures to warm up above 50 before we use this product. Another product that I like to use is Nature Defense by the Pond Guy, which is, honestly, I just want to do a little plug. He's a great resource. It's an online resource that I used whenever I was starting out, trying to learn, what was out there, how to do this, how to maintain, how to build. There's just blog after blog on that website, and it's a great place. But then you can also buy beneficial products for your pond for helping maintain it. But this is a mid-season boost and a water clarifier. So it stimulates the nitrogen cycle to promote health and balance. Treats water by attacking the suspended organics. Okay?
So is it time to do this last one now?
I wouldn't say we're out of the woods yet for cold weather. I think we still have another month or two before we start planning for spring.
So would you do the mid-season, that one at the bottom?
I would do that midsummer, like
that's
July,
summer.
August.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
it was a
Hang on just a second, I'll answer your question.
Okay.
Clarity Defense is another one.
Oh, I
This-
see there's a cold.
Yep. This is, I'm trying to go from warm to
Sorry.
cold. That's all right, no, you're good. Clarity Defense, right? So if we're having high phosphate level, I think there was a question on Facebook a couple months ago about what people use to remove phosphate from the water. I think this is an excellent product at removing that, right? So it traps the phosphates and any excess nutrients. It will help clump floating particulates. So if you've got a lot of organic matter floating around in your water column because the fish are stirring it up, or we've got good circulation, Mike, I know you've dealt with this. This is a great product to throw in the pond, and it will help clump those together to where they sink to the bottom and can be eaten up by the natural bacteria that live down there. All right? It also stimulates bacteria and can buffer pH. All right? Now, if we've got a neutral pH, it's really not going to do anything, but it will help buffer if we're outside of whack a little bit. And it also provides trace minerals. So again, some of those minerals that I talked about that we find in tap water, they're very good for fish health, promoting healthy bones and healthy skin. This product will help bring some of those back into the water column as well. And then Mud Defense. Mud Defense is probably one of my favorite products because it helps break down any of that organic debris that sinks to the bottom of the pond, right? So if we're doing seasonal cleanups of our pond, this product is a great bacteria that we can throw into our pond. It sinks to the bottom. The bacteria become very prolific and break down any of that sludgy waste. If you're dealing with a bog that's clogging up, right? Treating it on a monthly basis with muckaway will help keep some of that muck from building up in that bog and help keep the water flowing through it so that those roots can extract that excess nutrients out of the water column, right? And then for cold weather season prep, so as the water temperatures start to drop below 50 degrees, let's introduce some cold water hardy bacteria so that over the winter months, we still have our natural cycle that's happening, right? And the seasonal defense helps get us there. So it accelerates decomposing leaves, organics that may blow in there through the fall. And it's also infused with barley straw to assist with water clarity, right? Barley straw has been used for a while on clearing up algae, right? It's a very successful product in doing that. What I like to do, the Pond Guy, he has this defense pack. So a lot of those Pond Guy products that I mentioned come in this whole box, right? So it's got everything you need to get you through a whole year, right? Which is a great product. It also comes with an algicide, so if you are dealing with difficult situations of algae, it's got a good algicide. It also has an oxy-lift for your waterfall, your streamway. So any of that stubborn algae that might grow on the rocks and start looking unpleasant, you can sprinkle this oxy-lift on there and it'll break down all that algae, right? Get your stream looking fresh again.
But you have to turn your waterfall off?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some instructions. You got to turn your waterfall off, let it sit for about an hour or two, and you can turn it all back on, and it's healthy for fish. It's fine for them to have in the water with it. Okay? Does anybody have any questions?
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't do that. The last two things, the muck and the sludge and the fall season prep, would you do those both now, or if you were gonna, I don't have.
So, no, we're in the cold season. I think that, if you're a little bit behind on your maintenance, now would be a great time to introduce the cold season defense, absolutely. And then as the water temperatures start warming up, let's get ourselves prepped with the seasonal defense.
Okay.
You've got a couple more questions. Is that good? No? Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's
So,
fine.
I have a lot of anaphyrs that grow, first of all, I don't have to put some big stock for Hoya.
Yeah.
But, I'm just kind of separated, because I have like 6 different, little small ponds. So I can so it's so thick, it's like I can take a stick in there and pull it, and there is just
Tons of it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy that it's growing as much this time of year, but
Well, we've been warm.
huh?
We had that really
Oh,
cold
yeah,
snap, right?
Right.
But that was kind of short-lived, and we warmed back up to spring like that. I've got taro that's sprouting.
You what?
I've got taro that's sprouting right
Oh,
now.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's all I had to do is just kind of thin it out and just kind of separate it from
I would, yeah.
ponds. But it's real good oxygenator.
It's a great oxygenator, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that doesn't like to be planted, really. It's good to let that float around. I don't care if it gets caught up in the skimmer. For me, it's kind of just more of a maintenance
I don't
headache.
understand. So, yeah.
Yeah, everybody's got their own way. I mean, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought up plants. Like, for any of us that are dealing with algae blooms, the more plants that we have in our pond, the better they're gonna do at eating up those excess nutrients and taking away that nutrient algae loves. Algae loves carbon dioxide and nutrients, right? Nitrogen and phosphates. So if we can get those out of the water by having lots of plants, a good healthy bog system, we can kind of eliminate some of those algae issues that we have in the summertime. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if I cleaned out my pond, almost emptied it, and the bog in October, and I didn't put in any kind of beneficial bacteria, so could I use the pond prime now, as well as the seasonal defense for winter?
So the pond prime is really only when you're adding water, right, to defluorinate it mainly.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you test your water, you're seeing levels of ammonia and nitrites, which I don't think the RVJ, because your fish would show that.
Yeah,
It would be dying right now.
okay.
But if you saw levels of that, you could also top off pond prime to kind of knock that toxicity back
So
down.
is there any, besides the seasonal defense for cold, there's nothing else that I should be tossing in there? No?
There's actually a lot of products. I mean, it's finding the products that you enjoy, that you like. These are some of the ones that I like the most, but, where is it? So nature's defense is a good one, right? But again, it likes warmer water, so
Yeah.
I would pay attention to what the water temperatures are. I'm not seeing any extreme cold fronts coming in the near future, but if we did and that water temperature dropped below 40 degrees, those bacteria would die off,
Oh, okay, okay.
and you would have to reseed again.
So I can wait until we have
Yeah.
some warmer spring.
I think the best thing you do is do the cold season defense,
Okay, all right, cool.
and let's just wait until we have more consistent warm days and we see a trend in our water temperatures warming up.
Sounds good.
So the cold snaps will, make the bacteria,
So those
not
bacteria.
kill off the good bacteria.
Yeah, absolutely. If the water temperatures drop below that 50-degree threshold that they love to live and thrive in, they're gonna get knocked down.
My pond is spring fed and it has IPA, water does. Is there any, and I don't do filtration because of.
You're just naturally, yeah.
Is there any, well, two questions. Is there a threshold on the number of fish you should have per gallon of water?
Good question. It really is 1 to 2 koi per 100 gallon. Per what? Per 100 gallon.
Oh, yeah,
You're safe.
Are you having any issues with fish health?
No. Zero.
I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah. We had a fish that had fin rot, and that's really what kind of opened our eyes to some water quality issues. Right, one of our favorite big koi got fin rot.
Well, I guess my concern is I'm putting a lot of nitrogen in my pond when I feed them, I guess. Maybe not.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime we feed them and they excrete waste, that puts ammonia and breaks down to nitrogen. Absolutely. But you also have pretty much a continuous turnover with your water, with your spring, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's probably knocking a lot of that out, and it's going downstream. And then plants, right? And I'm not talking about lilies and lotuses. Those are potted plants. Those roots are locked down in that clay soil. We're having to put nutrients into those plants to get them to thrive. I'm talking about plants that have exposed roots into the water, right? Irises and taros and those types of plants. Yeah. But I think you've got enough turnover that you're probably really barely ever have issues. Maybe in the summertime when the water starts warming up.
About 1/8 of my water gets replaced every day during the wet season.
Yeah, so tremendous water changes, right? We don't always have that luxury because that would cost us a lot of money. You're getting it naturally, right? It's a big benefit.
But it seems like the more fish I get, the more algae I see.
Yeah, and it could be because you're probably getting outside of that balance, right? Of that turnover you're getting from the spring versus your load. Right? So maybe not have so many fish. Or put in more plants.
No problem.
Maybe have a bog, maybe put in an artificial bog, right? You got your spring, but maybe outside of that you put in a big bog area.
I've got that.
I'm just gonna add, because I'm tested about this too, not tested about it, the group. Is that, just the pond water is really good for your plants. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, just toss that right back in the.
Well, that kind of goes inside with the nutrient levels.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
And again, the more plants we have in the pond, the less nutrient levels we'll have.
Is that right?
I couldn't do it.
I like to say, you can put the pond water into the plants, the pond water, if you're like cleaning out the pond water, like, use that water into in your garden.
Yeah.
Pond
Yeah.
water. Yeah.
I'll find out.
I don't even know why I said that. Everybody just remembers that.
No, it's good to remind us, right? It's good to remind us.
I'll pump it out as much as, whatever you think needs to be out. The deepest part is about 42 inches. The shallow part is about 24 to 30 inches. So I was thinking probably take it down to the shallow part and then leave about 20 inches of water. Is that too much water?
Just to do a water change, or are you talking about for your fish rescue?
No, I was saying, I pump it, it's the deep part's 42 inches, and the shallow part's about 30 inches.
Yes, sir.
Now pump, empty the water out down to the shallow part. That's gonna leave about 20 inches of water.
Uh-huh.
and about, as big an area is, about 1.5 of these tables.
Okay, yeah.
And would that be satisfactory?
Again, for the fish rescue or for just doing a water change?
For the fish rescue.
For the fish, yeah, no, I think that's,
Yeah, I'm sure the pump on that, you know, circulate the water, keep it well aerated.
yeah. No, I think that's great, absolutely. Absolutely.
Goldfish question.
Yes.
So every spring, I lose a few goldfish. Invariably, the largest goldfish first. And it might only be 2 or 3 of them. Is that because I'm not oxygenating that water? And if I put bubblers in, would that help?
Look, I don't think you can have enough aeration. In all honesty, then, I think oxygen is key, right? The bacteria are consuming oxygen. The fish are consuming oxygen, right? They need that to thrive as well. The more oxygen we have in an environment, the more prolific the bacteria are gonna be.
Yeah.
The more clear our water's gonna be.
The fact that it's the biggest fish that goes first, does that?
I wonder if it's lifespan, right?
Of a goldfish?
Forever?
Yes.
So let's look at water quality, right? A lot of times, guys, I want to reiterate this. Whenever we lose fish, what's the last thing we look at? Our water. And that should be the first thing that we're looking at, right? I talk to so many people in here that come in for, fish die-off, and I'm like, well, what's your water quality? What's your water parameters? Well, I don't know. Well, so I'm sure something in there is the cause of their death, for sure. So, if it's springtime, I'm sure it's because we don't have enough bacteria, there's a high load, there's probably a lot of ammonia.
Okay.
Yeah.
How often should we be testing? I mean, there's something that's established.
I would do it anytime you're doing maintenance. I think it would be a good, kind of habit to get into, that every time you clean the skimmer, test the water quality. It's probably about a 20-minute time span to do all the drops into the test tubes and wait for the colors to change and then just look at everything. The more often you're doing it, the quicker you're going to be on top of the change. And being able to adjust for it and save your fish and keep your water clear.
You really can't overdo water testing. You just run through your kit faster.
Yeah.
But they still have time to test them.
Yeah. Good questions, guys.
I never lost a fish, well, one got stuck in the skimmer.
I mean, pneumonia got to his head, he didn't know where it was at.
When I lose fish, I brought you up to
Cats, yeah. Cats, hares,
no herring.
raccoons.
No herring, raccoons, cats and possums, all of that.
But if the water's hard, we can add rainwater. Is there anything, anything else we can add?
There's pond salts that you could do, but I'd be real cautious of doing that. How hard are we talking, right? So again, any fish that you get from this area are accustomed to our water parameters, right? So they're okay living in reasonably hard water. Look back at my water, right? Hardness of 9. That's just my tap water. I think my pond's running about 10 or 11. I've got a lot of limestone hardscape, so it's running a little bit higher than my water quality. So what's high?
I have to go and test it.
Exactly. Good answer.
I don't know.
Good answer.
It's not hard to, it's not so hard that it's not flowing, let's put it that way.
Yeah, are you seeing along the edges, especially around your skimmer, is there a lot of scale, a lot of light?
No.
You're good.
Okay.
You're good, right? So that would be a good indication you've got really hard water.
That's amazing.
Well, I can't say I've never.
What is
lost.
it?
Aaron got a couple, our raccoon got a few. I threw in too much, during the drought, I threw in, I went to do a water change and I put in dechlorinator, but I didn't put in enough because the town tripled the chlorine, so I should have tripled the dechlorinator and I didn't know about it until later and 6 of them went.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yes, I have lost fish, but I have not lost anything other than the one that I found in the skimmer. I have not lost anything in maybe 5 or 6 years.
We're all fish murderers, right?
Yeah, well, I was.
Steve's up in Florida, likes to remind us we're all fish murderers. We've all done it. Forgetting to turn your water off. That's, everyone has done it.
Well,
I've done it.
Ellen's got a timer on her, you've got a timer on yours? And Ellen has it, and
So the first time I did that, I lost all my fish, except for the sunfish. Patrick will never die, right?
Wait, what is it that you did?
Do what?
Too bad they're.
Put what?
it says you can put a timer on your hose, so it will only run for 6 minutes and fill up a little bit, and then it will shut down, so it doesn't run all night long.
Sometimes, especially through evaporation, you get to learn, I've lost 4 inches, and that takes 10 minutes to refill, or 2 minutes to refill. You kind of get a sense of how long it takes, right? And if you're not sure, always go a little less than what you think it is, and you can run it for longer once you get there, right? It's not full.
And you automatically put a timer on your phone, so it's gonna beep at you and tell you to turn it off.
But I think what they're talking about,
Turn off the phone and still forget.
there's automatic timers that you can put on your hose faucet, that you can set it for however long you want it to run, and when it gets to that time duration, it closes it off, it shuts off the water feed. Which, again, I've got one on my hose because I lost fish, and I don't want to go through that again.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, so you use the, what's it called, scent conditioner, the dechlorinator.
It's conditioner, yeah.
Well, yeah. If you run the hose instead of going directly into the water source, if you run it like through the air, does that?
No.
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 You just think it does, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Cause I was thinking, like, instead of it going directly into the water, that it might filter out some in the air, but I guess.
Yeah, no, it's dissolved into the water. It takes a lot of time for it to evaporate out. And I think it's more time than what it takes to travel from the inlet hose into the
I
water.
bet you our water in Austin is a lot worse than in Austin with real high.
Well, anytime you've got warm temperatures, they increase the chlorine. So when we're really hot, yes ma'am?
What if you have an automatic fill thing?
I hope that it's not filling too much volume, right?
It never has.
Within relation, right? So it should trigger pretty early so that your top off is, 20, 30, 40 gallons. Some low percentage that the rest of your water it dilutes out into and is not toxic or dangerous.
Yeah, it's like a 20,
Yeah.
it
But if
does continually.
if it stopped working and it dropped, 4 to 6 inches, right?
Well, I know.
And then you had to top that off, that would probably be a higher concentration
Right,
in relation to the rest of your volume.
right.
And that's what we're talking about, mainly. Did you have a question, Doctor?
This time of year, I've got this greenhouse, all kinds of leaf crap.
Yeah.
But my water's just crystal clear.
Sure.
Everything.
Sure.
And then, of course, in the spring, it starts to.
But we also don't have a lot of plant load either, eating up any of that debris that's being broke down and converted into nitrogen, right? So that algae is filling a void, and it's coming in there. But as spring comes along and everything starts growing and eating up all those excess nutrients, that tends to die off, and then our fish will eat that, right? Fish are a great consumer of algae if it's not too much, or if it's not the wrong kind.
Is there any value in stirring up what's on the bottom?
There is.
Loose?
Yeah, there absolutely is, right? Breaking some of it up, reducing some of the volume, and then getting it flushed out, right? A lot of us would have skimmers that we would have to make sure is cleaned out when we do that. But yeah, sure. Yeah, if you're in the aquarium trade, we often scrub algae to keep our aquariums clear. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it as long as it's cleaned up in a responsible way.
This muck and sludge reducer would be better
Yeah.
in the spring?
Anytime, right? So anytime that we have debris on the bottom of a pond, I like to use the muck wet. I predominantly use it in my bogs to keep it nice and cleaned out. But I'll throw it in the bottom of the pond too. And it's really more about that extra load from the fall. Yes.
What about using some of the more underwater plants like anacris or even like parrot feathers, things that are more like underwater oxygenators? Would that also help
Absolutely.
reduce? So maybe add some more of those sorts of things.
Absolutely. The problem is he's got a lot of koi. He's got a lot of koi.
Yeah. Could be feeding.
Those little devils like to play. They love they love to play with those plants, those loose plants, uproot them, tug on them, eat on them. They're kind of ferocious in that way.
How quickly I have used some of the sludge and muck things in the past, but how quickly does that start to work?
Usually pretty quick, as long as you're using it as prescribed. I'd say, 4 months should break it down substantially, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a maintenance kind of a thing.
Absolutely, yeah, no, it's not gonna be an overnight situation, right? Much like some of these flocculants, right? So if you've got a lot of floating organics, you can put this stuff in there, the next day it's sunk out, right? But it's still in the water. It's just at the bottom. And so that's where the muckaway come into play, to just help continue to eat and break that down. So it doesn't become suspended again. Yeah, and oxygenation. Oxygen. These bacteria need oxygen to proliferate. Yes.
I have a plant question.
Okay, I may not be the best person.
Tropical lily
Yeah.
that I moved into my garage into a giant tub.
Yeah.
Should I be doing anything for it other than monitoring?
Honestly, right now it's just survival, right?
Yeah.
Are you lighting it? Do you have light on it?
Yeah, the sunlight comes through the windows.
Oh, you're lucky.
It gets
I've got artificial light and they're not doing great.
Well, but the water looks slimy. I mean, it's been sitting in its tub for
Well,
months
it's
now.
gone a little dormant, so it's not eating up any of those nutrients. That slime is algae.
But he's okay.
Yeah.
She.
Yeah. So that rhizome on it, if it feels mushy at all, it's done.
Well, but since it's gotten warm, it's trying to bloom, and I'm like,
Oh, that's
quit.
Well, it's in an artificial environment, right? It's in a warmer environment, so it might try it. I'd say let it. It'll give a boom, kind of a jump start for the spring. You'll have flowers before any of us.
Hey, awesome, you keep the lily in the pond.
Yeah.
I keep mine in the pond.
Hey guys,
They're
anytime,
tropical.
if you're interested in these products,
Tropical and the
come
other
up here,
one.
look at it, read it, take notes. Right? They're here for your viewing. These are some things that I like to use, that I brought in for you guys to learn about.
Thank you.
Yeah, good.
I was told that it's below 50 in the
You should leave it in my phone.